before another bill ever touches your phone, before a payment reminder flashes across your screen, before the first anxious thought of the morning even finds your chest, something deeper has usually already happened. You have entered the day bowed to lack. That is the place Thoth would strike without mercy. Not your bank balance first, not the unpaid amount first, the inner posture, the invisible surrender, the silent habit of waking up already braced for loss, already rehearsing defeat, already expecting the day to corner you before it even begins. Most people keep saying they want money, but that is not the raw truth living underneath the surface. What they want is relief. They want one full breath that does not feel borrowed. They want to hear a notification without their stomach tightening. They want to walk into a grocery store without doing the math of humiliation in their head. They want to stop performing calm in public while panic gnaws at them in private. And because they do not admit this clearly, they chase money in a frantic state that poisons the very thing they are trying to build. That is why desperation is so deceptive. It disguises itself as urgency, as ambition, as responsibility. But most of the time, it is just fear wearing productive clothes. It does not widen your vision, it narrows it. It does not sharpen your intelligence, it pushes your nervous system into defense. And a mind in defense is terrible at recognizing real openings, because every imperfect opportunity feels like a threat, every delay feels like proof, and every obstacle feels personal. You stop looking for a path and start hunting for emotional anesthesia. Thoth, in the current of wisdom tied to his name, would not flatter that condition. He would not tell you that wealth is some childish reward handed to whoever wishes hard enough. He would drive the blade deeper. He would say the kingdom begins in mind, not fantasy mind, not delusion mind, not a hollow, glittering version of positive thinking that refuses reality. He would mean the mind as command center, the source of perception, interpretation, decision, direction, and inner rule. That is why two people can wake up equally behind, equally burdened, equally pressured, and still move in opposite directions by nightfall. One rises already identified with defeat. The other rises under pressure too, but refuses to hand their mind over to the pressure. One spends the day trying to numb the wound. The other spends the day trying to restore order. One wants immediate soothing. The other wants structure, even if structure is uncomfortable. And money, more often than people dare admit, responds far more faithfully to structure than to emotion. Look closely at what usually happens during your worst financial seasons. You avoid checking the numbers. You postpone the conversation that matters. You leave the message unopened because uncertainty hurts less than confirmation. You buy something small just to feel that you still have control over something. You promise yourself tomorrow will be different. Then tomorrow comes, and your energy is already leaking through shame, comparison, exhaustion, and mental noise. After that, you call it bad luck, blockage, evil eye, or stagnant energy, when in truth it is often contradiction living inside your own field. Your mouth says, I want prosperity, but your system says, run, hide, shrink, survive. That split is not harmless. It leaks into timing, into body language, into negotiation, into courage, into consistency, into the way you speak about your own value, and into the kinds of decisions you make when discomfort arrives. Confusion never builds wealth. Confusion builds repetition. It creates cycles that feel cursed only because they are familiar. And the more familiar they become, the more you start mistaking them for identity. When people hear the phrase money frequency, many imagine something theatrical, glowing energy, perfect affirmations, cash, drifting toward the hands of someone who smiles hard enough. That fantasy misses the point completely. Frequency is the emotional and mental climate you sustain so consistently that it becomes your default pattern of response. It is the tone you carry when nobody is watching. It is the quality of your inner stance when life does not immediately cooperate. It reveals itself not when you sound wise, but when you are triggered. Watch what happens the moment an unexpected expense shows up. A delayed payment hits, a weak opportunity appears, a plan collapses, or a negotiation gets uncomfortable. That instant tells the truth. Not your social media captions, not your spiritual language, not your biggest dreams. The reflex tells the truth. The automatic reaction tells the truth. The way your body contracts, the way your thoughts sharpen against yourself, the way your voice changes when pressure enters the room, that is where your real frequency lives. And most people trying to attract money are not actually vibrating openness. They are vibrating offense. Offense that they have less than they think they should. Offense that others seem to be moving ahead. Offense that they have worked this hard and still feel behind. Offense at lost time. Offense at their own story. But an offended mind does not generate abundance. It generates resistance. It enters a secret war with reality, and from that war comes a poisonous thought. Since life has already taken from me, I should receive without changing anything in myself. That thought is quieter than self-pity, but it is built from the same substance, and law does not bend for self-pity. Thoth would not point you toward wounded entitlement. He would point you toward order. He would point you toward correspondence. He would show you that what rules your inner world eventually bleeds into speech, pace, appetite, focus, standards, endurance, and the very way you meet possibility. Not because the universe is a toy that obeys every thought, but because your interior state becomes the lens through which you read every opening life places in front of you. Be brutally honest about your daily life. You say you want wealth, but your environment often reflects depletion. You say you want expansion, but your day is built on reaction. You say you want clean money, yet many of your habits quietly drain your energy, your attention, and your clarity. You say you want financial rescue, but you spend hours feeding resentment, comparison, and mental defeat. Then you wonder why solutions keep slipping past you. It is not always because no door exists. Sometimes it is because your inner disorder keeps you from recognizing the door when it appears. Here is one of the cruelest examples. The answer you need often arrives without glamour, not as a miracle, not as the dramatic reversal your ego secretly craves. It may come as a modest opening, a humbling bridge, a conversation you do not feel excited about, a service you need to offer before you feel ready, a small job that strengthens your structure before it rewards your pride. But the wounded ego wants a cinematic rescue. It wants a grand event, worthy of all the suffering it has endured, so it keeps rejecting the bridge while claiming it is waiting for destiny. To align with money is not to pretend you are rich while you are struggling. It is not spiritual cosplay. It is not smiling over unpaid bills and calling that mastery. It is something far less glamorous and far more powerful, refusing to behave like someone internally conquered. You can be in a real squeeze and still reject the identity of collapse. You can acknowledge lack without kneeling psychologically before it. You can say, I am limited today, but I will not think, move, speak, and choose as if I am garbage because of it. That distinction changes everything. The moment scarcity stops being your circumstance and starts becoming your self-concept, you begin making decisions that preserve pain instead of ending it. You accept less because you feel like less. You avoid necessary action because your nervous system wants relief more than repair. You misread reality because fear now sits in the driver's seat. And once fear is driving, you no longer solve problems cleanly. You start trying to escape sensation instead of building stability. That is where bad deals, impulsive spending, silence in negotiation, and desperate choices are born. One of the deepest truths nobody tells people clearly enough is this. Financial solutions are often pushed away by emotional urgency. Practical urgency is healthy. Deadlines matter, numbers matter, consequences matter. But emotional urgency is different. Emotional urgency is when the real mission becomes ending the feeling, not resolving the issue. Once that happens, you stop acting with precision and start acting with hunger. Hunger makes you overcommit, undersell, overspend, overpromise, accept insult, reject patience, and call chaos movement. This is where the symbol of Thoth becomes severe. He would destroy your favorite illusion first, the belief that abundance begins outside you. No. First comes order, then flow. First comes direction, then expansion. First comes the discipline to interrupt your own mental noise before it takes ownership of the day. Only then do you gain the kind of sight that can recognize opportunity without contaminating it with panic. A disordered person often loses the morning before breakfast. A recalibrating person protects the morning like a sacred battleground. That protection can look almost invisible from the outside. It may simply mean not beginning the day inside comparison, not flooding the mind with noise before it has found its center, not surrendering your first hour to pressure, fantasy, dread, and reactive scrolling. It may mean sitting down with the facts before the drama gets there. It may mean naming the problem cleanly, separating data from imagination, and doing the hard thing before the easy distraction calls your name. None of this sounds mystical, but this is where power returns. Every financial problem has at least two layers, the practical one and the psychic one. The practical layer needs strategy, numbers, decisions, structure, and follow through. The psychic layer needs internal government. If you handle only the outer layer, while your inner world remains ruled by shame, fear, impulsiveness, and avoidance, you will recreate the disorder later under a different form. If you handle only the inner layer and hide from practical reality, you become intoxicated with spiritual theater. True alignment is born when consciousness and execution stop living on opposite sides of your life. Maybe the most painful possibility is this. Maybe you are not out of options at all. Maybe you are out of attunement with options. Maybe your mind has become so committed to proving that everything is hard, unfair, delayed, and stacked against you that it no longer has room to notice the next intelligent move. And the next intelligent move is rarely dramatic. It might be a call you keep delaying, a skill you keep minimizing, a boundary you need to set, a leak you need to close, a proposal you need to make, a simple discipline your ego keeps dismissing because it is too ordinary to feel magical. Life often tests your frequency with the small before trusting you with the large. That is where many people fail. They want abundance without becoming steady enough to hold it. They want money without becoming the kind of person who can sustain order, consistency, clarity, and presence. They want relief without passing through the discomfort of responsibility. And responsibility here does not mean guilt. It does not mean blaming yourself for every hardship you have ever faced. It means reclaiming power where you have been performing helplessness for too long. There is also a lie that quietly poisons many people's relationship with wealth, the idea that caring about money is low, dirty, or spiritually inferior. So they split themselves in two, soul on one side, matter on the other, depth on one side, prosperity on the other. But mature wisdom does not force that division. Matter is also part of order. Money, rightly understood, is structured energy moving through exchange, value, support, circulation, and possibility. The problem is not the desire for resources. The problem is either worshipping money or feeling unworthy of it, because in both cases it becomes your ruler. Maybe you know this tension intimately. You say you want more, yet guilt rises the moment you imagine receiving more. Guilt when you think about charging properly. Guilt when you picture comfort. Guilt when you dream of leaving survival mode while others are still suffering. So every time prosperity moves near you, your own moral confusion stains it. Then you wonder why it does not stay. But guilt is one of the most sophisticated forms of sabotage. It can dress itself as humility, purity, spiritual depth, or compassion, while quietly keeping you weak, hesitant, and under-resourced. There is another wound, even more hidden than guilt. Sometimes you do not want money for what it can build. You want money for what you hope it will prove. You want it to finally certify that you matter. You want it to silence old humiliations. You want it to erase the memory of being overlooked. You want it to become evidence that those who doubted you were wrong. But once money becomes a substitute for identity, your frequency becomes ravenous. Then wealth does not enter a stable house. It enters a starving emotional system that tries to use possession to heal self-worth. That never ends well. Money that arrives to medicate identity is often burned through by insecurity, display, bad decisions, fear of loss, or the inability to hold peace. No external amount can stabilize a person who still has not chosen who they are internally. Thoth would take you back again to the same throne room. Rule the inner kingdom first. Whoever is not sovereign within will be governed by forces outside. You already know this in your body. You know what it feels like when anxiety speaks for you, when scarcity lowers your standards, when shame keeps you silent, when urgency makes you easy to manipulate. So vibrating correctly is not a performance of positivity. It is quiet sovereignty. It is the moment you stop asking, why does this always happen to me? And begin asking, what in me still feeds this pattern? That question is uncomfortable precisely because it removes the pleasure of helplessness. It does not deny that life can be brutal, unfair, or deeply painful. It simply refuses to let your pain become your permanent throne. It returns you to the role of conscious creator, not a childish creator who thinks mind alone controls everything, but a responsible creator who understands that the quality of mind shapes the quality of perception, persistence, and action. And that is what opens the door to tangible financial change. A clear mind notices openings earlier. It negotiates with less emotional leakage. It learns faster. It cuts distractions with more honesty. It tolerates frustration without collapsing into drama. It does not need to look successful to others. It needs to remain functional under pressure. That is frequency in embodied form, not a slogan, not a mood board, not a ritual detached from conduct. Frequency is what your nervous system, choices, language, and standards repeatedly declare when life squeezes you. Want to know whether you are misaligned with money right now? Watch for 3 signs. First, the moment you think about finances, your body feels contraction, but your mind finds no direction. Second, every setback becomes proof that life is personally against you. Third, you swing between fantasies of a massive breakthrough and periods of drained paralysis. That swing is devastating. One day you announce total reinvention. The next day you cannot bear to open the app, answer the email, or face the numbers. That is not intuition. That is emotional rhythm enslaving your center. The right money frequency asks for stability before excitement, ground before grand vision, right repetition before dramatic transformation. Real financial healing is not born only from a powerful realization. It is born from a better pattern sustained after the emotional high fades. It is born on the day you act with dignity, even when nothing seems to be responding yet. It is born when one hard week does not become your identity, when one delay does not turn into prophecy, when one rejection does not become theology, when you finally discover, almost angrily, that your mind needed less hype and more emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is not coldness. It is not becoming numb. It is not pretending pressure does not affect you. It is simply refusing to let fear interpret everything on your behalf. It is seeing an expensive bill and not instantly deciding you are cursed. It is hearing no and not turning it into never. It is cutting back today without experiencing yourself as diminished. It is earning less for a season without marrying your identity to that season. It is planting without shame, rebuilding without spectacle, continuing without applause. There is a strange dignity in that kind of energy, and life responds differently to it, Because financial solutions do not always arrive as piles of money. Sometimes they arrive as the clarity to stop an invisible leak. Sometimes they arrive as the courage to leave a pattern that has been draining you for years. Sometimes they arrive as the maturity to admit that your relationship with consumption was self-soothing, not freedom. Sometimes they arrive as the strength to learn a skill deeply, charge honestly, simplify ruthlessly, or remain consistent after the initial excitement dies. Correct frequency does not make you float away from reality. It roots you so deeply in reality that growth finally has something solid to stand on. Maybe your deepest fatigue is not about money itself. Maybe it is the exhaustion of trying, hoping, slipping, restarting, and never seeing immediate proof that anything is changing. Maybe you are tired of invisible resistance. But what if a large part of that resistance is not invisible at all? What if it keeps showing up in your words, your interpretation, your morning state, your private self-talk, and the stories you repeat with religious devotion? What if your language has been building an altar to scarcity every single day, while you keep wondering why scarcity still feels at home inside you? Listen to yourself when nobody else can hear you. It never works. There is always not enough. Money disappears. For me, it is harder. As soon as it comes, it goes. This is just my life. You call that realism. Many times it is self-hypnosis, not because words are magic by themselves, but because repetition shapes perception, perception shapes action, and action shapes result. Language matters because it trains the nervous system to expect certain kinds of futures. Speaking differently is not enough by itself, but poisoning yourself with the same phrases every day is not neutral either. At some point, you have to choose between two identities: the person to whom life keeps happening, and the person who is becoming compatible with the life they say they want. That choice affects more than your thoughts. It alters the way you walk, breathe, answer messages, spend money, handle delays, listen in conversations, and carry yourself through uncertainty. Frequency is not an abstract aura. It is embodied coherence. It is what happens when your desire is no longer being sabotaged by the script you rehearse inside yourself every day. And this may be where real financial transformation begins, not when you ask, "How do I make money come to me?" but when you ask, "What in me still speaks, reacts, chooses, and interprets like someone devoted to scarcity?" That question can wound your pride, but it can also free you. It can show you where you still romanticize chaos, where you still confuse impulse with freedom, where you still use emergency as identity, where you still worship fear by obeying it. And when that becomes clear, everything changes, because money does not consistently move toward those who idolize it or demonize it. It moves more cleanly toward those who learn to stand before it without kneeling and without spitting at it, those who can face numbers without collapse, those who can receive without guilt and build without vanity, those who can endure the slow season without turning bitter, those who can recognize that the real prison was never only the lack outside, but the loop inside that kept interpreting every event through the same wounded lens. That is the threshold. That is the turning point. And once you reach it, one final question becomes impossible to escape. If the financial answer you say you want appeared in front of you today, not dressed like a miracle, but as a real, workable path, would you actually recognize it, respect it, and sustain it? Or would the same mind that brought you to this edge still be hungry for panic, still addicted to urgency, still loyal to the identity of lack, still vibrating the very pattern it claims it is desperate to leave behind? That is the question beneath all the others. That is the question that reveals whether you are truly ready for abundance or merely tired of suffering. That is the place where excuses end, where self-deception cracks, and where a different financial life can finally begin. Stop romanticizing manifestation as if it were just a sweet thought about money floating through your mind. Real manifestation is harder than that, cleaner than that, and far more demanding than most people are willing to admit. It is not wishing. It is not waiting. It is not whispering abundance in the morning and then spending the rest of the day vibrating fear, shame, urgency, and defeat. Actual transformation begins when 4 forces move together inside you at once. You uproot scarcity at its source. You install a new identity built on worth and direction. You train your body not to live in panic, and you act every day in a way that matches the life you say you want. That is the mechanism, not fantasy, not spiritual decoration, not empty positivity. You do not manifest what you casually want for 5 inspired minutes. You manifest what you repeatedly energize with emotion, what you rehearse in imagination, what you accept as self-concept, and what you prove through behavior. That is why so many people pray for prosperity while unconsciously rehearsing collapse. They desire wealth, but they embody loss. They say they are open, but their system is braced for disappointment. They ask for relief, yet spend the day confirming the frequency of lack. So the first shift is ruthless. Cut off the wrong signal the moment it appears. When the old voice says, "Nothing ever works, money disappears, my life is blocked. For me, it is always harder." Do not negotiate with it and do not sink into it. Interrupt it immediately, replace it with command. Something like, "Scarcity does not rule my mind. I choose order, clarity, and solution." That is where real power starts. Manifestation does not begin when you ask for something new. It begins when you stop mentally feeding the exact reality you claim you want to leave behind. This matters more than people think, because thoughts repeated under emotional charge become inner architecture. They stop being passing sentences and start becoming law inside your nervous system. And once your nervous system accepts those sentences as law, your behavior begins serving them. You hesitate when you should move. You shrink when you should speak. You delay when you should decide. So yes, the interruption seems simple. It is supposed to. Most profound shifts begin with a brutal refusal to keep kneeling before the same internal script. Then comes the second layer, and this is where most people get lazy. Embodied visualization, not vague dreaming, not cinematic fantasy, not you floating in some blurred future full of millions, with no emotional texture and no real human detail. Every morning and every night, close your eyes for 5 minutes and enter one precise scene that proves your financial reality has changed. See yourself opening your phone and noticing steady income arriving. See yourself paying a bill without that familiar stab in your chest. See yourself in a negotiation, speaking from calm instead of fear. See yourself making a decision with clean certainty instead of survival tension. But here is the part that makes it work. Do not just watch the scene like an outsider. Enter it physically. Feel how this version of you breathes. Feel how they sit. Feel the pace of their thoughts. Feel the steadiness in their shoulders, the softness in their jaw, the absence of panic in their stomach. The subconscious does not respond most deeply to words. It responds to lived state. It listens to what the body believes. That is why visualizing while still embodying desperation sends a mixed signal. You must rehearse the nervous system of the person you are becoming. After that, speak identity with force. Not dead affirmations, not lifeless phrases repeated like homework. Your words need emotional authority. Stand still, look ahead, or look directly into the mirror and say them slowly enough to mean them. Say, "I do not chase money in desperation. I become someone who can hold it." Say, "My mind recognizes opportunities, my energy sustains solutions, and my actions create results." Say, "I am leaving the frequency of lack and entering the frequency of clarity, value, and circulation." Say, "Money responds to the order I create, the value I deliver, and the posture I maintain." Do that for 3 to 5 minutes, but do not perform it. Decide it. There is a massive difference. Theater does not transform identity. Decision does. You are not trying to impress the universe with beautiful lines. You are re-educating your inner authority. You are telling your mind, your body, and your behavior what standard now governs this life. That is why feeling matters. Not because emotion alone creates magic, but because emotion stamps meaning into the system. A sentence spoken with full internal agreement lands differently than a sentence spoken while secretly rolling your eyes at yourself. Now go deeper. Sit down with paper and do one of the most important exercises in the entire process. Rewrite your financial identity through brutal honesty. On one side, ask, who have I been while living in the frequency of scarcity? Then answer, without protecting your ego. Maybe you have been the person who avoids numbers, delays hard choices, buys to numb anxiety, feels too small to charge properly, dramatizes setbacks, assumes the worst, lives in comparison, or waits for rescue instead of building structure. Write it all down. Name the version of you that has been unconsciously preserving the problem. Then on the other side, ask, who must I become to align with money in a clean and stable way? Again, be precise. Maybe that version faces numbers directly, responds faster, cuts waste without self-pity, sets prices with steadiness, notices opportunities without needing them to look glamorous, does not collapse under pressure, stays teachable, stays present, stays organized. This is where manifestation stops being pretty and starts becoming real, because your new reality will not stabilize if your old identity keeps running the machinery underneath it. The old self must be challenged in daily actions, not just renamed in inspirational moments. And that brings us to the body, which too many people ignore. Nobody manifests intelligently while vibrating panic all day. A dysregulated body distorts perception. It makes everything feel bigger, darker, more urgent, more hopeless than it actually is. So before any important financial action, before sending the message, making the call, opening the numbers, having the negotiation, regulate your system first. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6 to 8. Repeat for 3 minutes while saying inwardly, I leave fear, I enter command. Do not underestimate this. Many terrible financial decisions are not made because people are stupid. They are made because people are physiologically overwhelmed. A regulated mind reads reality more accurately. It does not confuse discomfort with danger. It does not take urgency as proof of doom. It does not choose from collapse. And solutions appear more clearly to a system that is not flooding itself with alarm signals every few minutes. This is where manifestation becomes deeply practical. You are not trying to become detached from reality. You are training yourself not to meet reality in a condition of internal emergency every single time. That alone can change the quality of your choices more than another month of empty motivation. There is another practice almost nobody respects enough, the ritual of evidence. Every day, record 3 signs of movement, even if they seem small. Maybe you had a sharp idea. Maybe you saved money you would usually leak. Maybe a useful contact responded. Maybe you noticed a hidden pattern in your spending. Maybe you received a lead, a conversation, a moment of unexpected clarity, a chance to correct something, a new angle on an old problem. Why does this matter? Because manifestation is also training perception. A mind obsessed with absence will keep confirming absence. A mind trained to recognize movement begins building trust in flow. This does not mean faking progress where none exists. It means refusing to stay blind to the subtle forms of progress that abundance often arrives through. Most people expect flow to announce itself with fireworks, but many times it first arrives as insight, correction, restraint, simplification, timing, or a small opening that leads to a bigger one later. When you document evidence daily, you teach your mind to stop worshiping lack as the only thing worth noticing. You become available to the momentum already trying to build beneath the surface. Then comes the dividing line between delusion and real manifestation, aligned action on the same day. After visualizing, after affirming, after regulating, ask one question: what is the concrete move my prosperous self would make today? Just one move. It may be following up with someone, promoting your work, learning a useful skill, reviewing your accounts, ending an unnecessary expense, pitching an offer. reaching out to a new client, renegotiating a debt, opening a new stream of income. Energy without action becomes fantasy. Action without internal alignment becomes burnout. Real results are born when the two move together. That is why the old model fails so often. People either become spiritually inflated and practically passive, or they become hyperactive and emotionally disordered. Both extremes sabotage flow. The first one waits for miracles. The second one grinds from fear. But when state and strategy unite, something changes. Your effort becomes cleaner. Your choices stop bleeding chaos. Your actions begin carrying coherence. And coherence is magnetic in a way desperation never will be. Desperation chases. Coherence attracts and builds. You also have to stop speaking about your financial life like it is a curse stamped onto your existence. Repeated language becomes programming. If all day long you say, "It is impossible," nothing changes. "I am unlucky. My life is blocked." You are reinforcing the identity you claim you want to break. So shift your speech into command language. Say, "I am in a season of reorganization." Say, "I am building flow." Say, "I am learning to hold money well." Say, "I am opening pathways for solutions." This is not self-deception. This is refusing to hypnotize yourself against your own future. Your words should not be used to deny reality. They should be used to direct it. There is a profound difference between lying to yourself and leading yourself. The first one disconnects you from truth. The second one brings truth under discipline. You are allowed to admit where you are without turning your current season into a final identity. You are allowed to feel pressure without declaring yourself doomed. You are allowed to be in reconstruction without talking like a person born for ruin. There is also a powerful relational exercise with money itself. Take a physical bill or open your banking app and spend 1 minute looking at it with presence instead of fear, not with guilt, not with resentment, not with worship, just presence. Then say, "I respect this energy. I multiply it consciously. I am capable of receiving, sustaining, and directing it." That may sound small, but many people have never once met money with a clean nervous system. They look at it through lack, shame, servitude, jealousy, or disgust. No wonder the relationship stays distorted. You must train yourself to meet money without kneeling to it and without rejecting it. The goal is a clean bond. Neither obsession nor avoidance, neither hunger nor contempt. Money is not your God, and it is not your enemy. It is a form of organized force moving through value, exchange, and stewardship. When you relate to it from dignity instead of emotional pollution, something reorganizes inside you. You stop acting like a beggar around it. You stop acting like it contaminates your soul. You become someone capable of directing it rather than being psychologically ruled by it. At night, seal the day properly. Before sleep, ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I vibrate scarcity today? Where did I vibrate solution today? What would my financially aligned self do tomorrow without fail? Then spend 2 minutes visualizing yourself succeeding in tomorrow's key action. This matters because sleep consolidates repetition. The state you reinforce before rest sinks deeper into the subconscious than most people realize. So do not drift into sleep marinating in defeat, replaying panic, or reliving the old self. Close the day by strengthening the version of you that is learning how to hold flow with integrity. If you want the clearest formula possible, here it is: interrupted thought, regulated emotion, clear internal image, renewed identity, disciplined language, aligned action, and daily repetition. That is the engine. That is the real machinery. Serious manifestation does not promise instant wealth or magic appearing from nowhere. What it does is far more powerful and far more sustainable. It restructures your mental, emotional, and behavioral field so you can perceive better, decide better, act better, hold more, and stop sabotaging your own movement. This is how attracting financial solutions actually becomes concrete. Not because money falls from the sky to flatter your hope, but because your mind becomes sharp enough to notice openings, your body becomes stable enough to hold pressure, and your behavior becomes coherent enough to build trust with life. That is why a disciplined 21-day protocol can change more than years of vague wishing. In the morning, regulate your breath, speak your affirmations, enter your visualization, and take one real action. During the day, cut off scarcity thoughts and correct your language. At night, record evidence, review your sabotage, and rehearse tomorrow from the identity you are building. And here is the pivot that changes the game faster than almost anything else. Every time fear rises, do not ask, "What if this goes wrong?" Replace it with, "What is the next intelligent move?" That question returns you to power. It stops the spiral. It stops drama from pretending to be intuition. It takes your energy out of catastrophe and puts it back into direction. This is how frequency becomes destiny, not in one dramatic speech, but in repeated moments where you refuse to let panic decide who you are. So understand this once and for all. Vibrating at the frequency of money is not smiling on the outside while inwardly serving fear. It is not repeating beautiful lines in the morning and then spending the rest of the day feeling doomed, delayed, inferior, and trapped. The right frequency begins the moment you stop bowing internally to scarcity. It begins when you look at your life the way Thoth would demand you look at it, not as a victim trapped in chaos, but as a consciousness capable of reorganizing its world from the inside out. Money does not move most powerfully toward those who beg for it in desperation. It moves more cleanly where there is clarity, value, courage, order, and direction. And maybe that is the wound that hurts the most to face. You may have spent far too long trying to attract prosperity while still being emotionally loyal to lack, still thinking like someone bracing for loss, still reacting like someone governed by fear, still choosing like someone who does not trust life, themselves, or the process. And until that changes, the scenery may change, the numbers may change, the faces may change, but the feeling of tightness will keep returning in new costumes. That is why the real turning point does not begin when more money arrives. It begins when more consciousness arrives, when your mind stops betraying you, when your energy stops leaking, when your presence stops apologizing for existing. From this moment on, every time fear touches you, the question is no longer, "Why is my life like this?" The question is, what in me is still vibrating scarcity? Every time anxiety tries to run ahead, return to center. Every time neediness tries to rush you into impulsive action, remember that solutions are not born from panic. Every time your old identity whispers that nothing ever changes, break that agreement internally and move as someone who no longer belongs to the same cycle. That is how frequency changes. Not through one grand performance, but through a private, disciplined refusal to keep surrendering to the pattern that has been impoverishing you. The money you keep chasing outside begins to recognize you when something inside stops living like a beggar and remembers it is a source. When your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes direction again. When your heart stops confusing urgency with destiny. When your presence enters a cleaner, stronger, more integrated state. At that point, you are no longer just trying to earn more. You are becoming someone who can receive, sustain, and expand without self-destruction. Someone who can hold increase without turning it into anxiety, vanity, or chaos. Someone who no longer needs wealth to prove worth, but can finally use wealth as expression, stewardship, and creation. So now the issue is not whether abundance is real. The issue is whether you will keep feeding the frequency that sinks you, or whether from today forward you will sever your inner allegiance to lack and occupy the place of someone born to live with more order, more power, and more flow. Because the instant that changes within you, life begins responding differently. Your eyes change, your timing changes, your choices change, your standards change, and sometimes the very sign you have been begging for does not arrive when reality changes first. Sometimes it arrives the moment you do.